Hello everyone, good afternoon and welcome to the latest edition of the Wellbeing series with Vitality. My name is Jamie and I am part of the coaching team at Vitality, and today's event is one that I've been looking forward to for such a long time. We are so fortunate to have Maggie Alphonsi as the director of our Vitality Performance Champions program, and I can honestly say we were just discussing, we both started at a similar time. She is genuinely one of the most inspiring people that I've ever worked with. So for those of you who don't know who Maggie is, she is considered by many to be England rugby's greatest ever flanker. And if you don't believe me, there's actually a video on YouTube that you should check out because I saw it earlier and I would confirm that. Maggie was at the heart of a hugely successful England women's team for around 15 years, winning 7 consecutive Six Nations titles, as well as the biggest accolade in the world of sport and rugby. And she won the Women's World Cup in 2014. Since retirement, Maggie's been inducted into the Rugby Hall of Fame. She's pursued a successful career in broadcasting, as well as sharing her message through various talks and platforms. But like so many, all of Maggie's success has not come without overcoming challenge. From her upbringing in, it's probably fair to say, not so leafy Edmonton, an area that I know pretty well, to online sexist and racist abuse, Maggie has committed to tackling these topics. And I would say she continues to be a powerful voice for change. So in this session, we'll be discussing Maggie's journey, the work necessary to create a brighter future as well. So wherever you are, I feel like it's really important that you do get involved in this conversation. On the right-hand sides of your screen, there'll be a questions box. Please do input anything in there. Spread the message far and wide, because I think actually that we all have a role to play really in this. So that is enough of an introduction for me. I'm going to introduce a very special guest. Maggie, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm excited and it's a real privilege to spend this time with you.
Hi Jamie, and thanks for the introduction. I mean, you did forget the word legend. Sometimes people put the word legend, Maggie Alphonsi in, so I have to excuse you for that, but that's fine.
Okay, well, I can refer to that. Humble as well, I think, is often underused. Yeah. Thank you again, Maggie. It's so good to spend this time with you, because I think we've got, a few areas that we want to touch on. Obviously, October is Black History Month. There's been a lot of movement around Black Lives Matter since sort of May time last year. And you've experienced all of these things firsthand. So I really think you're a valuable voice to add to this conversation. But before we get into that, I feel like for context and the way to sort of structure this conversation, it would seem like a logical place to start at the beginning of your journey. That was an obvious point to start at the beginning. And kind of the things that defined you as an adult. So would you mind sharing with us kind of like your early years story and what that will look like?
Yeah, I guess my story, like you really highlighted, did start at the beginning. My initial challenge was that I was born with a physical disability called clubfoot. So when my right foot was completely turned all the way in, and I had an operation when I was young to straighten my foot. I think that was quite difficult growing up, because we all know young people want to run around and be active. So that really had a bit of a challenge for me growing up. And I guess, like you mentioned in your introduction, I grew up in a council estate in North London, in Edmonton, single parent family, no brothers and sisters, and it was a fairly difficult environment, I'll be honest with you. And I think I would say that I took that attitude from the council estate environment into my school life as well. So at school, I was quite a challenging individual, but I was smart, but I just didn't connect with the school content. That was probably the biggest thing for me. I struggled with that, but I really liked sport. And I guess my childhood changed when I guess my PE teacher, a lady called Lisa Burgess, pretty much encouraged me to take up rugby, which makes me laugh. So she was a Welsh athlete herself. She played for the Welsh women's rugby side, had black eyes and bruises every weekend. And I think it was amazing that she came to this school in North London full of rough kids and said, look, rugby is the sport you need to take up to really help you improve your behaviour. So that really changed my life. So I guess that was the start of my journey. And then I went on to find rugby, and then it took me on to further success.
So I always find that story funny, because you may not know this, Maggie, but I've played a bit of rugby in my life, as you can tell by my stature.
No.
Yeah. I played a bit of rugby. And it was actually one of my best friends at school, Hugh, and my PE teacher, Mr. Humphrey. So I was pretty quick. So I thought, I fancy a bit of rugby. And in year 8, I think I was about 13 then, they convinced me to play in a game. And I remember they put me on the wing. They were like, "You're going to be quick. You're going to be nippy." I played on the wing. And I remember I was running to the try line thinking, I'm gonna get this. This is going to go well. And honestly, I think I got spear tackled by the highest tackle. It was assault. Like the geezer took my head off. And I still remember it to this day. So like rugby wasn't for me, I don't think. But I've always been a strong believer that your sport kind of chooses you. Would you say that like when you found rugby and you were introduced to rugby, what was it about it that you thought, this is a bit of me?
Well, first, Jamie, if you still want to take up rugby, I know a few good rugby clubs that would love to take you on with your pace anyway.
Bigger these days, yeah, that's my area.
So I guess to end on your point there with regards to everyone can find their sport and a sport will find you. For me, rugby union did find me. You know, if I look back at my school life, I was like every young girl who basically had confidence issues with their body. You know, I had big strong arms, I had big strong thighs. I had a bit of an attitude, unfortunately, because you know I did like to muck about, and I guess when I found rugby, it just almost aligned everything about me. So you know, having big strong arms and big strong legs was a strength to have, and also having that determined attitude was brilliant in the sport of rugby. And also, I was very good at talking, and I could socialise with several different types of people. So I worked really well in terms of building relationships. And it's a sport that it's all about discipline. I mean, every sport is about discipline.
Yeah.
But rugby, there's a lot of talk around, you know, respect, and I needed to have that. And I think that really did change me playing the sport. I had to be respectful to the referee, but also to my teammates. And I grew up very fast. I definitely did. And if it wasn't for rugby finding me, I'd hate to think where I am where I would be today. It really did. It changed my life, but also saved it as well.
Yeah.
And the sport just gave me confidence.
You're not the first person I've heard say about consistency and discipline being kind of the keys to success. Do you think that the upbringing that you had in terms of not a probably optimal upbringing in terms of conditions and what you would wish for others necessarily, but would you say that the values that you learned from that were instilled into you? Because was there like a feeling of I need rugby to help me get out of this, or like what were the values that you learned which you think helped you succeed, would you say?
I think at the time, growing up in the council estate, I didn't necessarily enjoy it, but at the same time, everyone who lived in that council estate were the same like me, single parent families. It was a very diverse range of people who lived in the flat, and also people from my school. So I kind of, in a weird way, sort of enjoyed my upbringing, but at the same time, I also felt I did not want to continue to live here when I got older. I didn't want to see my future still stuck in that area. So I guess I was driven by wanting to achieve more. That was really quite a big thing for me. And if anything, I always say your background doesn't have to define you, but it definitely will help drive you. And that's what it did for me. And I guess when I think about what I went through, it really did make me think I'm not going to let any barriers or obstacles get in my way. And every time I saw a barrier or an obstacle, you don't think, oh, what am I going to do? You just think, okay, where's the next step? If I can't go forward, I have to go lateral. I have to find another option. So I was always problem solving and always thinking about other options. And like I said, I had to work very hard to achieve success, but many people do, regardless of their background. You know, if you really want it, you'll get there.
I think that you are someone who has that in you, and so it maybe is taken for granted that how special that is. With what you were achieving though and what you were doing, growing up like you did, going to play rugby, you loving it, wanting to pursue it more, how was that received when you got back home and you went back to the council estate and you were like, I love rugby, this is for me? Because we can accept it now and love it and celebrate it, and that's exactly what we want to do today, is encourage and convince more people to get involved in what they love. But I imagine like there were stereotypes around. It probably wasn't as straightforward as, oh, Maggie loves rugby, cool. There must have been some questions, or to be honest with you, I mean, I wouldn't question you in anything because my head got knocked off once in rugby and I know you could have done the same thing. But did you receive any sort of like, not negative necessarily, or maybe it was, but was there like an eyebrow raised, be like, oh, that's interesting?
you know, growing up in North London, basically you support football. That's what you do.
Yeah,
And the two teams that you support are either Arsenal or Tottenham. So I wasn't too far
yeah,
from the Tottenham football ground. So I decided to support Arsenal. And, you know, to my sins, I'm probably still a bit of an Arsenal fan. So growing up, everyone basically followed that sport. That was a sport to do, boy or girl, you know, you played the sport. So when I came back to school and, you know, really emphasised the fact that rugby union is now going to be my sport and I'm going to keep progressing with that, I think most people were just kind of like, wow, that's unique. You know, I don't think anyone actually knew what rugby union was. That's the thing. You
yeah,
know, in North London at the time, Saracens was the biggest rugby team, but people didn't really know about it. And I guess back then, the stereotype of rugby union was, you know, middle class sport. You rarely get people from social deprived backgrounds play the sport. You have to go to private school. And to be
mhm,
honest, people in my area or in my school would not have heard about rugby unless they were required to play it, you know, in their PE lessons. Even then, none of them wanted to play. So rugby
yeah,
wasn't really a sport that people cared about. So when I took it up, I think people were like, "Oh, wow, interesting. You know,
yeah,
what is this for?" And I think that really did sort of. I think, if anything, it did encourage other people to want to watch it after that, because
cool,
you can't help not influence others when they see that you're doing a sport that's very different to them.
yeah,
But I definitely truly believe that it was a sport that I'm so glad it found me. Even though
yeah,
everyone else loved football, I think I definitely encouraged many others to want to take up the sport after I started to do it.
yeah. I think that's amazing. And you speak about all of these things in hindsight, like the fact that no one else played it, so you were different and you did have to go out on your own to an extent. And also the fact that you travel, and it's obviously probably naturally most people would associate it back then with men playing. All of those things that you've stereotypes that you've experienced, would you say that they created any barriers in your progress or in your career? Because it's easy for you to say now that you've overcome them, but at the time, were they actually, now that you look back and think that actually was quite tough?
Absolutely. So I had a few barriers. So if I think about first, my first barrier would be, you know, being a woman playing the sport that's perceived to be very male dominated. So going to my local rugby club at the time, you know, there was a women's side and there was a girls' side, but we all played on the back pitch with all the
Mm,
dog poo, with basically one floodlight, which was ridiculous. And there wasn't really any change rooms for the women. So most of us got changed in the car park in our cars, or got changed before we got there. So you can imagine feeling like you're second class. That was
yeah,
awful. I look back now and I think we had to pay membership. So we were paying membership for this club and we weren't really getting the same rights as the boys, let alone, you know, the men.
yeah,
So I think that was the first initial hurdle. And I didn't let that stop me. I just continued on, really. And then I think the other hurdle probably growing up would be financially, you know, coming from a deprived background. Playing rugby at the time was quite expensive, you know, having to get a membership. Most rugby clubs tend to be in the country, so you have to, you know, get a taxi or somehow find transportation to get there. And my mum didn't drive, so I couldn't really ask her to get me to any rugby clubs. So I used to have to always ask friends or the friends' parents to drive me.
yeah,
I did a paper. I worked several jobs to basically fund my rugby, so that was a bit of a challenge. So I'd probably say those are two things growing up that were quite difficult. At that time, I don't think race was very much an issue, because
cool,
I guess being in North London, there were a few people from different backgrounds who went to the club. I probably still was, you know, one of the few people of colour in that team, but at the same time, it probably wasn't really something I thought about unless
yeah,
I went to clubs or areas where it was very not diverse. That
yeah,
there were times when I might have gone, oh my god, I'm the only person of colour in this whole field,
yeah,
or clubhouse, you know, and actually how am I going to take that? But I guess maybe as I've grown up through the sport, I've never let it bother me. If anything, I've probably tried to embrace it and be, wow, people know who I am because I'm the only person of colour on the field or in the
yeah,
clubhouse, and people are like, wow, she's an amazing rugby player. You know, so that
yeah.
to always be noticed is always in a good way. It has been positive, I guess, throughout my career.
I think that's a very unique thing as well, that you've taken that what could be something that would be daunting or off-putting and you've turned it into a positive. So when you were like really young, just a quick follow-up, were you aware? Did you think I am one of the only people of colour playing this game? Or actually, we're quite naive to the whole thing, would you say?
I'd probably say the latter, naive to it, but only because I've always seen sport generally as just being about the sport. It's not
Yeah,
about your gender, it's not about your colour, your sexuality, or your faith. It's about the sport. And I never really let that bother me. And I guess when I turned up to my rugby club, what made me feel at home was the fact that my PE teacher was there. She gave me good, she made me feel welcome. But also, you know, I saw many other women there, many other girls, and I did see a bit of diversity. So I felt kind of at home.
yeah,
And I guess going to other rugby clubs, yes, I was aware, but again, I guess that's been my attitude to this day, not to let it bother me, because do you know what, I'm here, I'm very proud of who I am, and I'm going to play some good rugby, and I'm
yeah,
going to make sure that, you know, others who are worried about the sport see me and be like, wow, I want to take up the sport because
yeah.
of her. So that had always been my mindset, I guess, growing up.
Is it like it's almost like you're way ahead because that's the way it obviously should be. Like it's a sport and you're just
Mm,
playing it for the sake of the sport. And I know you've spoken about having a lot of admiration for people like Denise Lewis, someone who obviously in her sport has been well known and has created an amazing career in broadcasting, and she's appreciated for being valuable asset to the sport, and that's exactly what you're talking about. And we also, I'm sure you've met her, but Zainab Alima,
yeah,
like doing some amazing things. Like, and it seems that there is um, more weight being added to this argument. But outside of the sort of female or the race side of things, I know that since retirement, definitely you've done some amazing things in terms of being part of panels on broadcasts. And often you're talking about the men's game, and there's a panel of men, and then you're on there as well. So it seems like it's a male dominant environment. There's not an even split. And you're actually, again, one of the first to do this, which is amazing. But how would you say that was received when you first did that? Because I know that you've spoken about some of the pretty rough like feedback and negativity that you've received online. Um,
yeah.
was that the first that you've really had to directly deal with that, would you say?
Yeah. First, Jeremy, I'm going to go back to the bit where you said that Denise Lewis was my role model. You know, some people do say that I also look like her. I mean, if you sort of
Yeah.
catch the light at the right angle, you can see that I look like her. To be honest, I've seen her say she looks like Maggie Alphonsi.
I was
So
going to
you
say
can,
she
you
looks
know,
like you. Yeah,
that's
I
really the
agree.
yeah,
I
totally.
forgot who I was talking to then for a minute.
So then to answer your question with regards to the challenges I've had to experience, you know, working in punditry, and especially when I was one of the first, you know, working alongside many other men, usually being the only woman, person of colour. Unfortunately, I can't lie to you, I have had many, I guess, social media negative tweets. And the reality is you sort of learn to not let it sink in, but that's easier said than done. So I guess when I first started out, I used to get a lot of tweets about being a female. You know, what does a woman know about men's rugby? You're only there to tick, you know, quotas. Unfortunately, you know, to start off, I got a lot of that. And then over time, when they start to see you regularly, they learn to realise that I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, good.
So you get less of that. And actually, the reality is now, every one negative tweet that you might get, you get 100 positive tweets. And I think I would say, yeah, I've also had obviously racial abuse, but that wasn't really when I was standing up doing broadcasting. It was when I, you know, was very open about saying, you know, I want to one day be the RFU president, you know, and if I do become that, I'd be the first person of colour to achieve that, and first woman, etc. But you know, unfortunately, what you hear is and what you see is people who have issues with that come out and start to voice their opinions. So unfortunately, I have had a bit of that. But like I said, what I've always done, I guess, I tend to screen save some of those tweets and I use it to fuel my fire. Because I
Yeah,
always say, you know, it's like leadership. When you when you want to be a good leader, it's not about you being the best leader. Actually, it's about how you inspire others to want to follow in those footsteps. So I might get negative tweets. Again, I'm going to keep going. As long as the broadcasters are hopefully appointing me, I'm going to keep going because I really want to make sure that I see many other women, many other people of colour, you know, working in that industry. And you do see it. I mean, there's loads of us now, which is fantastic across various
yeah,
sports. And we all get it. You know, Alex Scott, unfortunately, has had a lot herself, and Karen Carney as well has had a lot. But these are
yeah,
individuals that keep on going, and they're so good at what they do. they all they can do is inspire many others to follow. So yeah, I've had that, but at the same time, I love what I do. Working along some of the guys as well, you learn to try and be authentic. Because when I first became a broadcaster as a pundit, I used to almost try and be like the lads. And I've learned very quickly that actually the only way people really want to listen to you is when they see the authentic you. So that I've tried to be more myself now.
That must be a real challenge, though, to be confident in who you are when you know people are scrutinizing, and particularly maybe even more so. But you've mentioned a couple of times so far about how negativity or setbacks have fueled your fire. What is it within you that makes you want to prove people wrong? Or do you think that's something that, you can get motivation intrinsically or extrinsically? And for me, like throughout everything I've seen you do, are trying to do things to make a change significantly. Like it's like a big thing. We're not talking about like, just your day job. You're talking about like societal changes.
Mm.
Is that important to you? Like, what do you want to achieve with all of these things that you continue to get these people that are just uneducated idiots, but yet you still want to prove them, and also not in a nasty way. You're saying, I accept that, but I'm going to keep on doing my thing because the majority see the good in this.
Absolutely. I think the reality is with social media, and we all know about this, everyone's got a voice, everyone's got an opinion, everyone wants to voice their opinion. And to be honest, working in broadcasting, I sort of expect it. If I'm being opinionated about players and coaches, I expect people to be opinionated about me, yeah. But at the same time, not talk about my gender or my, my race, because it's got nothing to do with the conversation. And I guess for me, what I've always tried to do is I don't like to make it about the person who's providing me negative comments, because I don't really care about them, and actually it's a waste of energy trying to change their opinion or react to their words. It's a waste of time. Actually, what's going to be more of an impact is if I just keep doing what I do and try to be the best that I can be. So be the best pundit, be the best commentator, like I was as an athlete. When I played rugby, yes, I got comments about I wasn't very good at this, or wasn't very good at that. Yeah, everyone's going to criticize an athlete when they are on a good day and when they're on a bad day. But I never stopped playing rugby because I got a bit of bad feedback or got a bit of negativity. Actually, what I did do was I just went away, kept working hard on who I wanted to be as an athlete, and I returned back to the field and performed. So that's the only way you can respond to negativity is just performing, because they got, what can they say, what can they do, who cares what they say, and who can they do. So that's how I try and manage things and keep moving forward. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, your actions clearly show everything. But do you feel pressure or responsibility to not let these people bring you down, because you're showing the way for others? So is that sometimes tough to keep going?
Jamie, absolutely. Look, there are times when I think, seriously, why do I need to do this? Like, why do I need to take all this negativity? I might as well just stop, because I could have an easier life, just not, working in this industry and just, going to watch rugby and enjoying it that way. But then I really have to think to myself, it isn't about me, it's about others. And like you said, sometimes you do feel a bit of pressure, because you think, God, I've got the weight on my shoulders, and it's the expectations on, seeing a female on TV, I want to do a good job. Seeing a person of colour on TV, I want to again do a good job. But I try not to let the pressure get to me. And I remember one of my sports psychologists said to me, a good quote you need to really refer to is a quote by Billie Jean King: "Pressure is a privilege, embrace it." And I've really tried to take that on. So it's about reframing the word pressure and seeing it as, if you're getting pressure, it's because people think you're good. So that's how I try and approach life now. I almost thrive off pressure. I hunt it down. And when you're in a situation like that where you think, I've got to perform, I've got to do well, it's about trying to, do it for others. I think to myself, right, pull it out of the bag, Maggie, you've got this. And enjoy it and smile. So I try and do that more, and thrive off the pressure situation rather than almost run away from it.
I think your attitude to that is amazing, and I think we'll come to a little bit more about failure maybe later on, and that pressure situation. Just wanted to also, conscious that we've got a few people in our audience who are watching from a corporate background and a workplace perspective, and I've always loved sport, been involved with it. I think sport can change your life, and not because of the sport itself, because of all the things that you learn around it. A question from our sales director, Greg. He's actually asked, how have you found the transition to corporate life, and have those challenges been there, and how have you overcome them in that way, if they have been?
Well, Greg, good question. All I can say is Vitality is amazing. It's the best business out there, and I would encourage everyone to work for them. That's what I would say. Now, do you know what? The transition from going from just being an athlete to then going what I call the real world, into working environment, an office space, corporate environment, it's a very different world. And I think that when I first started, it was challenging, because you have to almost understand the environment, people's roles, your contribution to the organization. There's an objective, we're trying to achieve something, and actually what's your role in that. So I found that really hard. Also, like having a different kind of routine. So when you're an athlete, you've usually got a team manager who basically tells you where you need to be, when you're going to eat. They basically do everything for you. Yeah. And when you come to obviously the real world, the reality is you've got to have control yourself. You've got to manage your own day, and you've got a routine. You've got to be in for a particular work time, and you've got to make sure you get all your work done by end of the closing time. So trying to get your head around that's quite a challenge. And also, I guess I had to manage my energy levels. And I know that sounds a really bit odd, but when you're a rugby player, you train, you generally get a time to have a bit of a nap somewhere along the lines. You have your lunch, you go and train again. I mean, to be honest, I look back on it, it's like a really easy life. It's like literally a day at Chamonix, it's brilliant. It's a different lifestyle. But then I come into the world of the corporate world. It's I have to make sure that I plan my day so I've got energy to really give it my all when I'm in the working environment. So that was quite hard. And there were many times when I first started work, I burnt out. I was tired by the morning, and I was like, oh God, lunchtime, I now need to have a little nap, and I just couldn't get my head around that. So there were challenges, but now I feel like I get it. And now that I work in my role as a director, I'm working with many former elite athletes, I'm almost trying to help them sort of get it as well, because the transitioning is a challenge, and no one really guides you or navigates you from the world of sport into corporate life, because it's very different. And sometimes you see a lot of athletes struggle with that, and I do think we could do more to support them, and Vitality's been great in terms of helping me anyway.
I also think that there's more to add to that in terms of when we started working together. I remember we did your first big event. It was a Champions Induction Day, and I watched you get there before everyone else. You were practicing your lines on stage. You were so prepared, and you nailed the delivery. And that's the athlete mindset I think that we could also learn from. So it's interesting to know that it's obviously tough when we need to support an athlete coming to the workplace, but also I'd be so keen to soak up everything that you know as well, because there's so much we can learn in terms of leadership, discipline, all of the things that we're probably all trying to do to improve. So yeah, I think we've seen both sides of where it can work really, really well. But then I think, Maggie, the next thing that kind of is really important, and again, a massive focus for this conversation, is around the kind of situation in terms of online racial abuse. We saw everything that happened since May, I think it was 2020, the George Floyd incident. There was a whole Black Lives movement around the protesting, but also focusing particularly on sport. It's been really visible, and it's been received generally by most, but not all. And there's a piece that I would definitely encourage everyone to go and check out on YouTube by Michael Holding. And I know, Maggie, you know Ebony Rainford-Brent really well, and she is just leading so well in this conversation. And there's a quote I've actually pulled out from Michael Holding where he says, "History is written by the conqueror, not those that are conquered. History is written by the people who did the harm, not by the people who are harmed. We need to go back and teach both sides of the story." I think, honestly, I'm on this call today with you because I'm curious about what we can do as a team to improve and do better. As a starting point, what have your experiences been, and where do you think that we currently are off the back of everything in the spotlight that has been focused on this topic for a little while now?
Yeah, I mean, to start off with, the movement was incredibly powerful. And I think what we saw through the movement was almost we started to hear people's voices. And in the world of sport, it's almost activism. We started to hear athletes speak out want change in their own sport. And if anything, this movement has been really powerful. And you refer to Michael Holding and Ebony Rayford-Brent and their interview, because that went viral. And I think what was again good about that was that they both shared their experiences. They both shared stories about history and the challenges we've seen there. And I guess if I think about my own experiences, and I have to say, my experiences are not a representation of everyone's experience. So I guess growing up, I never really experienced racism, but doesn't mean it wasn't there. So when I think about my time growing up in the area that I did, it was so diverse. There was every type of person you could think of, and I feel very privileged because of that, because I got to see every type of person, and actually you don't second look, because this is the norm.
Yeah.
And I guess when I think about growing up in sport, again, that's where the challenges were. I was generally the minority, I guess. And when I think about my experiences in rugby, I never experienced racism, again, like I said, but it doesn't mean it wasn't there. Because I didn't see it or hear it doesn't mean it wasn't happening. But as I got older, I think then you start to notice and you're more aware of certain things. So I'd probably say I experienced more racism in 2020 than when I did, growing up through rugby. And because 2020 was when we talked about the Black Lives Matter movement, I came out and very open about talking about being president for the Rugby Football Union. And then all of a sudden, racism has changed a lot over the years. It used to be quite blatant, and now it's quite subtle. People call it microaggression. Can't always pick up on it, but you're very aware of it. And that's been something we've noticed over the years. I think for me, what my role and what I think I've seen change is, again, one, people are starting to call people out. But we've got to be careful again. We don't want to create a council culture where someone makes a mistake and then all of a sudden we counsel them out of society. I think it's important that we do check and challenge people, but do it from a constructive way. I also think what's been good over this movement is that we're starting to hear stories. People are sharing their experiences, but also it's not just about sharing experiences and talking about what the problems are. We're starting to problem solve. And in the world of sport in particular, I'm on the Rugby Football Union Council. There's been significant movement in trying to make sure that we as a council become more diverse, and that the governing body itself tries to increase diversity in the playing participation and also as volunteers and leaders within the game. And then I just think generally as a whole, I'm starting to see movement. And this movement may be a bit slow, but we're seeing movement now. And the good thing now is that it's part of the conversation, and I don't see this dying down now. If anything, I see it continually looking to pick up pace, because more athletes are continually speaking about it. We saw Lewis Hamilton, Naomi Osaka, she talked about it. In the world of rugby, Maritoji, Shauna Brown. There's been many of us out there being very open about our experiences and actually how do we continue to keep improving and keep moving forward. And obviously last month we had Black History Month, so again it brought to the light a few other areas. But we also must celebrate all the good stuff that's happening, because I think there has been a lot of good, and in the world of rugby, like I said, I have seen changes.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of points that I just wanted to catch up on there as well. Like, we're doing this event in November, which isn't Black History Month. Kind of intentional, because why are we just doing it in October? It's an every month conversation that we should be having and building on. And then the second thing is, it reminded me of Michael Holding again, talking about how racism has changed. And he gave a really interesting story about how it can be subtle and subconscious, but it doesn't mean that it isn't there. So for example, if a person of colour goes into a store in Oxford Street, he said that he's seen people where the security guards have looked at them differently or followed them around the store as if they shouldn't be in there. Whereas a young white person could go in there and probably not receive any sort of response. And those are the sorts of things that it's about, the awareness and building on that. And I wanted to ask you about the effect that can maybe have on your mental health as well, because it's not so obvious, but it's still there, which means you kind of internalize it a little bit. Would you say that you've been aware of it and it's affected your mental health in any way, or what have you lent on to support you with that?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, you do, in the back of your mind, think, oh God, am I going to be judged because of my colour of my skin when I go into certain environments? So a good example, I'd be very open and honest and say that I've had elocution lessons. I got a voice coach to work with me on my I guess my vocals, because I wanted to make sure that I spoke in a way that definitely that people could hear me, that I was clear. And yes, that was because I'm a broadcasting, but also, probably deep down, I want to make sure that I spoke in a way that really probably took away some of my North London accent. And it sounds really silly, but again, I didn't want to be judged because I spoke of sort of a slang, pronunciation of some of my words, which is such a shame. And I look back and I do think to myself, you should just be you, regardless of where you've come from. But I think sometimes society leads us down this pathway that we need to fit in. So the best way to fit in is by doing certain things. So again, I had elocution lessons. And I guess probably to an extent, other areas that make me think about my mental well-being and the effects that it has is I am always aware. I'm always aware. There's never a day when I don't go into a shop or a particular area. I'm not thinking, I wonder if I'm the only person of colour in this area. And if I am, I hope I don't get judged, or I hope people don't, approach me in a certain way. I like to think we're in a very diverse country, and actually I won't experience that, but it doesn't mean you don't think about it when you go out and about, in particular when you're in areas where it's not going to be very diverse. So that does make me sometimes think, and when I think about my own well-being, I'm just always trying to protect myself, and generally, and not let anything that may feel negative in. And as a result of that, you might change your behaviour. So I might not go to certain areas because I think, oh God, I don't want to be the only person there. Or I might not go to certain environments because of that. So it does have an impact, and we all sort of unfortunately change sometimes our behaviour to make sure that we do feel like we're fitting in, or we don't want to feel like we're uncomfortable.
Right, I think you want everyone to be on a level, but in reality, you do such a great job of being real, but being positive. But then when you say things like that, it's kind of like, in reality, though, that is something that you're aware of, and it's an added pressure that you have to deal with that others don't. And that isn't fair. That's a form of discrimination. Do you, by the way, you speak brilliantly, whether that's with or without lessons, the point is what you say is the best thing. But yeah, it's a real powerful point, I think, that actually you're having to deal with an addition which isn't necessary. Have you heard or got any thoughts about how we can do more to change the narrative? Like, from what like you said, there's progress, and that's really, really good. But how do we build on that? And that goes for everyone. Like, how can we all be part of this movement, not just those that are affected? Because actually, maybe others have more of a role to play.
Absolutely, Jamie. So you've just touched on it there. I think the key thing is that we all have a part to play. I think the challenge we experienced during the Black Lives Matter movement was I had a lot of people come up to me and ask me, Maggie, what do we need to do? And I'll be honest, I'm like, look, I know I'm a person of colour, but I do not have the answers for everything, and that is that's the challenge that we have, and we all have to take some sort of responsibility. We all need to sort of not to be afraid to ask the questions, of course, absolutely. Because I think that's really important. When you ask people generally give you a better understanding or insight from that person's their own experiences. But I'd probably say the best way for us to all educate ourselves is, one, to ask the questions, yes. Two, to listen and read those stories that people are sharing of their experiences. There's so many good books out there now. There's many people doing good podcasts out there. And many people just being open about their experiences. So to almost listen and understand about those experiences, like I have to, because I'm a person of colour, doesn't mean that I my experiences are the perfect experiences. And for me to understand what other people have been through, I need to also listen to their stories and listen to their podcasts or interviews as well, and ask the questions. I would probably say, where possible, many businesses now have started to get, diversity inclusion networks, groups, and actually it's really good to be able to, tap into them and understand a bit more about, what are the challenges, how can we better support, how can we be a good ally. That's really important. Vitality, we're brilliant. We've set up a diversity inclusion working group called Let's Talk Race, which is a brilliant group, and we're again trying to make sure we help support the organisation to make those appropriate changes. to ensure that we are definitely thinking about diversity and inclusion, and in particular when we talk mainly around race, really, when we do our work. So I guess it's about trying to make sure that we are all accountable for this, and that we all make sure that we ask the questions and do the research and listen to people's voices and opinions as well. That was a long-winded response. Sorry,
No,
Jamie. I feel like I've just
good
got
news.
long.
No, you've nailed it. I've got questions, listen, read, community, network, and allies. I think.
Brilliant. You summed it up so well.
Thank you. But again, like I've just asked you that question, and I was like, I've just added to the pressure. Like, I don't know. This is like we're trying to learn, but why have I come to you? Like you say, it's something that we just got to be much more aware of, and it's a team game. So all of those things, like we really need to, again, like
It's a
I'm
good starting
questioning
point,
myself
though,
right now.
Jamie. It is a good starting point. You've got to start somewhere. So when someone comes and asks me questions, I'm never going to turn them away, because actually it's my responsibility to help support them. They've been brave enough to ask me, so I need to sort of give them some response. But then that's where I'd go, look, continue to do some more fact finding and asking questions of other people, because it definitely does help.
Yeah, the intention I think is important, isn't it? Final section, Maggie, that the time goes so quick when I speak to you. We'd usually have this chat before we actually have a meeting. But I'm like, you do a lot of work in the kind of inspirational speaking space, because you are eloquent, but you speak passionately about what you do, and there's a real care behind it, like there's meaning behind your words. And I've heard you say often before about getting somewhere, like achieving things in life. And all of the things that you've learned through sport can resonate into and translate into other areas of people's lives. But kind of what I wanted to ask you is, it's going to be quite a broad question, to be fair, Maggie, so good luck. But like, what do you see the key things that you need to do to get somewhere? So whether it's the values that you've learned, the leadership things, we had a question that's just come in from Juliet about like, what values did you learn through rugby that's helped you become a leader now? Like, what do you think are the keys to success, or to making a change, or to getting progress? It's so broad. I've ruined that question, so I'll just pass it to you.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Jamie. That's a good hospital pass, I always call that. So I guess I would say my keys to success. So first, for me, what's kind of driven me has been knowing my why. And if I say to anyone who's watching this, Simon Sinek, he's the guy who talks about the concept of the why. And I've really sort of used that, know what my why was, know what my why is, and what drives me. So for a long time, my why was my single parent mum. I've now got a 1-year-old son, and he's my why. He's the reason why I get up every day, wanting to try and make sure that I give a good future for him. So that would be one of my first points. My next bit would probably be, I'm a true believer of stepping out of comfort. Like, you have to expose yourself to challenge. So, I talk about living in stretch. You have to do that. And one of the best quotes I heard was, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that's really important. The more you can challenge yourself, the more you can expose yourself to those, difficult environments, the more you almost see them as not being panic. You almost feel comfortable in them. A good example I always say to people, I used to have a stammer. I struggled to speak clearly as well as having a North London slang accent. So I guess I worked really hard to try and put myself in environments where I had to do public speaking. And as a result of that, I became more and more confident, and now I do it as part of my living. So it's really important to sort of step out of that comfort zone and be brave with that. I'd probably say my next point would be, I love the idea of having like a growth mindset. So many people might know what it is. So growth mindset, there's two types. There's a fixed mindset and growth mindset. So the growth mindset is very much about seeing like your intelligence and your ability as being elastic. And I truly believe the more we sort of feel like we haven't got to our destination, but more thinking about the journey and about trying to improve ourselves every day, it's amazing what you can achieve. And it's like I see it in a sporting content when I see parents, they pick up their kids and they always say to their kids, did you win? Did you win? Instead of saying like, what was the experience like? Did you enjoy the game? Did you work really well with your centre partnership, etc. Always think about the journey, about improving rather than what the end goal is. So I always try and encourage people to develop that growth mindset. And I guess if I was to give you one last top tip from my area of keys to success, it'd be to create a team you. So for me, I always say I've got my team Maggie, and when I work with lots of other people, they always say get that boardroom of success. So I've surrounded myself with people who are going to help me be successful. So if I think about my team Maggie, I've got a counsellor who I speak to once a month, and very much open about that. I share with her my challenges and thoughts with her. I also have a couple of mentors who guide me as a broadcaster, but also in the world of my professional career, and also put in my team people who are like loved ones as well. So it's important to have people who will also be critical friends who can check and challenge you, but you can share your goals with, but also not be afraid to be vulnerable with. So I would say those would be my keys to success. So hopefully I've answered your broad question, and hopefully I got to the point. So yeah, I would say those would be the ones.
You've made a terrible question really good. I would say the 4 things you kind of mentioned there was about your reason why, challenging, and maybe I'm going to add like embracing failure, which I might touch on in a second, growth mindset, and then team you. I love all of those things. The thing that I kind of wanted to just go into a little bit more is around like that team you, and something that I've been working on recently is kind of like the mental energy side of things. So you've got people around you who, when you walk away from a conversation with them, you think, I feel great. You are one of those, Maggie. Whereas there's others, definitely not going to say any names. I don't really have them, to be fair, but where you feel like, God, I had to put a lot in there, and now I'm a bit tired, I feel a bit flat, and I don't really know where I'm going in life. Are you quite harsh in selecting where you spend your time? Do you think that's important for you? Like a little bit more on that team you thing?
Absolutely. So I heard a really good term for what they call sappers, really, aren't they? So those who just sap the energy and the life out of you. And someone told me that actually he calls them sappuccinos. So you have a cappuccino, you've got the energy, and then you see them and they just take it all out of you. And unfortunately, there's a lot of individuals out there who have that, and sometimes because they've had negative experiences and they feel like they're not being listened to, hence why they tend to be sappers. But I guess what I try and do is not say that I avoid them, but I think you've got to put yourself in the right positions that you are going to continue to gain energy from others. It's really important that you don't let individuals pull that energy out of you, because it's quite tiring, it's quite time consuming, and actually it has an impact on your I guess your drive as well, and no one wants that. So I guess when I think about recruiting teams and individuals into teams, I make sure that everyone who makes part of the team that I recruit, so for example, my performance champions, every one of them, I know that they can feed off each other, they bring energy. And when you get a sapper, I've got to work hard to make sure that I bring them up to the same level. Because that's the hardest bit. Like when you've got someone who's a sapper, how do you help them? Because you don't want to leave them and isolate them.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to turn them around. So I guess the key thing is when you find sappers is to almost make sure that they've been listened to. So if you need to help them, listen to them. And then almost, if you're a leader, give them responsibility that they can achieve success. So it's important to play people in the right position so they can be successful. If you've got a sapper, listen to them, give them responsibility, ensure that they achieve success, and all of a sudden they become one of your biggest advocates. They turn it around because they feel like they have experienced positivity, they're being listened to, and actually all they want to do is sing everyone's praises. So it's important to work with those individuals if you feel like you've got a sapper in the team.
I think that's such a brilliant point, because what I was going to turn it around on you and say was, you are someone who cares about people. I think we all care about people. So when you get someone who maybe doesn't have the motivation or energy that you want to bring to something, instead of saying, I'm going to cut them out, they're not for me, actually, maybe you want to empathize with them and understand why they are like they are. So you're saying there about listening to them, giving them a role that suits them. Because I often think that by being selfless is not being selfish, because you're better for others. There's a South African saying called Ubuntu, I don't know if you've heard of it, which is about how Nelson Mandela spoke about it around when he was released from prison. And lots of sports coaches have used it. Glenn Rivers, who was a basketball coach for, I think it was the Boston Celtics. And it basically means, without being you, I can't be me. So I need you to be your absolute best so that I can perform to my best. And if you're not there, then my level is going to come down as well. So it's all about like us all being connected as one. And there isn't just your role will indirectly affect the world, and you don't know it and you don't see it, but it will. The small actions that you take every day will make a massive difference. And I think your point there about it's not about leaving others behind, it's about understanding them and getting them in a better place to be an asset to you, like you say.
It's sometimes quite hard though in a sporting sense. I can't lie, in a sporting world sometimes you can be quite selfish, and a lot of athletes will just cut you out if they feel like you're sapping their energy. But that's why I've learned, I've learned in the business sense that you can't do that. You've got to bring everyone along with you, because we've all got to achieve that same goal. So I guess that's probably one of the biggest things that I've found to be a positive coming into the world of the corporate space.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Like, you don't want to be, is it flogging a dead horse? Is that a saying? You don't want to be constantly doing something, something like that. You don't want to be constantly putting more energy in something when it's not right for them either. So you've got to figure out it works for you and them. Maggie, we've had some amazing feedback. Juliet has said, not a question, but just to say that Maggie is amazing. She's written amazing in capital letters. This is brilliant. It's really important that white people really understand our privilege. Me and White Supremacy is a tough read, but a must read. So I think we've mentioned a few things. Ebony Rain for Brent, Michael Holding, Sky Sports, Cricket, definitely check that out. There's a book there as well. And Maggie, what I'm trying to do with these events is to finish off, round up the consistent question. And I'll be honest with you, this is the first time I've tried it. And a couple of my questions today have been below par. But I tried to do something which I could make personal, but also give something for others that they can take from it. So in my life, I know that there's two things that I want to achieve. So I want to live to 100. I've always said this from like 5, and I want to get knighted. Like, there's two things I would love to do. Don't know why. Don't really know if it's actually so relevant, but I've always said it. So something that I want to ask you is, like, as ambitious as you want, what do you believe you can do? So you could say, I could be the next prime minister. I'm not putting things in your head, but like, no barriers, no restrictions. What do you believe you can do or want to do? Like, what would you love to be known to be? Is that a good question? I'm not sure, but I've gone with it.
Jamie, that's good. That's good. You've just thrown it out there and hope for the best. I love that. That's true Jamie style.
Thank you.
I guess the last thing I want to be is prime minister. I can't think of anything, to be honest. So if I was to say two things that I'd really want to be, like, I'm really fortunate and very lucky right now, and I'm really proud of that I have a platform that people can hear my voice and people want to hear my voice. So I wouldn't change that for the world. I guess the one thing that I want to be is just be a great mum. I know it sounds really cheesy and it doesn't impact the whole world, but I want to be a really good mum. I've been able to be the best that I can be as an athlete. I feel like I'm doing okay in the world of broadcasting and hopefully for Vitality as well. But I want to be a good parent who can be a role model for my child and show them that anything is possible. Like, that's so important. Growing up with my mum, my mum from Nigeria, she probably had her views and sort of said, women should do this, women should do that. And now I've changed her and she sees women can do anything, rugby, whatever sport you want to do. So I hope that I can have that one impact on him with the hope. And also being a male, I know that, it's important to have male allies in the world of sport or any industry. So I like to think that he could hopefully have an impact. So I know it sounds very minimal, but I hope to be, a good parent and a good role model. And my second thing that I would love to do or be, I guess I really just want to be, I want to leave a legacy. I don't know where it's going to be, but I want to leave a legacy. And my current goal is I want to be president of the Rugby Football Union. And that would be huge if I did that, because a sport that pretty much I picked up from a council estate, running on the fields, to think that I one day went on to play for England and then went on to one day, hopefully sort of run the governing body. I mean, the presidents don't run the governing body, but you are the face of the governing body.
Yeah.
So to think that I could be that would be amazing. And then to think that one day I could have my picture in the president's lounge, which, my picture would stand out because there, again, it's not very diverse. To think that could be the legacy would be quite powerful. So those are the two things: be a good parent and hopefully be the president of the Rugby Football Union.
I'm glad I asked it. And there was some thought behind it in terms of I wanted to get people to say things that they might be scared to say. that might seem silly to say, you know, like say anything. I want to be like, I often walk around London and it's an amazing place and you see these incredible buildings and you see people living in the most unbelievable places. And then I think, well, someone's got to do it. So why can't it be you? And I think, Maggie, I've only known you for 4 years or so, but everything that you've done, you've been unbelievable at. So no doubt that'll be mum life too. I know that the things that you've learned in sport, but the way that you are as a person. And I really hope that the presidency of the RFU comes up, because I think it'd be amazing. And I don't think I'd get a vote, but if I did, I would vote for you.
Absolutely. And Jamie, I forgot my third thing. The other third thing that I'd absolutely love to be is CEO of Vitality. I mean, that would be
great.
Pretty, you know, so to see if we can make that happen one day. One day.
Leave it with me. I think I can be the guy. Maggie, I think that if I could summarize, which I can't, but because of what you've done and what you do, someone tomorrow will start playing rugby or they'll want to improve their lives. And I think you should own that, because sometimes, you know, people don't, they're humble and they try not to. And it's for others to say, I'm sure. But like, I really do think you have a massive impact on me every time I speak to you. Like, it makes me want to do more and do better. And I think you have that from everyone. So yeah, it was totally worth the wait. I knew you wouldn't let me down. I knew I am your biggest fan, obviously borderline stalker, but thank you again for your time. It's been amazing.
Thank you, Jamie. Really appreciate it.
Nice one. So for everyone watching, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have and got as much value as I have from today's event. To find out more about Maggie, obviously, please do visit the Vitality website. The Performance Champions are all incredible. Love them all. They all add different values, different stories. And I'd really encourage you to get involved in that program. Maggie, website and Twitter, probably the two best places to find you, do a little bit more with you.
Yeah, I mean, go on my Twitter, which is at Maggie Alphonsi MBE. Have to put that in. And then my website, it's I think it's www.maggiealphonsi.co.uk. So have a look.
Yeah, please do that. And in the meantime, thank you again for joining us. I hope you join us for more of our events. Please do share these far and wide, get the message out, and hopefully everyone enjoys it as much as we do. Take care, have a nice day, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.